If China and the United States can work together, the world benefits. The United States has worked to help integrate China into the global economy. The United States welcomes the rise of a prosperous, peaceful, and stable China.
Yeah, what could go wrong? What could go wrong? The more we help China by engaging in these trade agreements where they just squash us, we allow ourselves to be abused in the trade relationship, they profit, they flood our marketplace with their cheap, gross, poisonous material. Remember the Thomas the Tank Engine trains had that paint that came off that was poisonous, the dog food problem, all this. Well, China knows that you flood the marketplace with Chinese goods, and there'll be fewer and fewer and fewer American manufacturers left. And if they can dominate that way, they'll have a lot more market influence here and around the world, and their power will ultimately grow. And there are a lot of people in the U.S. Senate who are Republicans who believe that, well, the more we engage with China, the freer China will get. Well, first of all, that's turned out to be just blatantly untrue. We've seen that since China joined the WTO. Bipartisan support for that, by the way, back in the late 90s. So what is the truth about our relationship with China, how it affects you, your family, why a lot of it gets swept under the rug during presidential campaigns? Very little discussion about China in these debates. Romney touched on China a little bit, and he was actually pretty good vis-a-vis China. But again, we have a bipartisan collusion on China. We'll continue to take your calls on this, the worst call in the history of the world, the Super Bowl. Everyone wants to talk about that. We'll get to your calls. Be patient. Mike Pillsbury is an old friend. He has a new book out, which is fabulous. It's called The 100-Year Marathon, China's Secret Strategy to Replace America as the Global Superpower. I have been trying to send up red flags about China and what they are planning to do for many years, and I get called a isolationist. I am a restrictionist. I'm a China baiter. I mean, I'm the worst person ever because I talk about China in a realistic fashion. But it's not stopped me, and I am so glad that Michael Pillsbury is with us now. He's the director of Chinese Studies at the Hudson Institute, and he's been involved in U.S.-China policy and strategy since our opening with China in the 1970s. He joins us now. Michael, how are you? Great to talk to you, my friend.
I'm fine, thanks. It sounds like you're the only person in America who does not have to buy a copy of my book, The 100-Year Marathon.
Well, it's great. It's great that you're there doing this hard work and reporting what so few either have the guts to report or the desire to report about our relationship with China. When I have said over the years, since I started in the media back in 1996, when I was talking about whether stealing intellectual property, stealing our supercomputer technology, what they were doing and continuing to bully Taiwan, I was always poo-pooed by our friends at a lot of friends at the Wall Street Journal, other people in Congress. I didn't know what I was talking about. I was another troglodyte. It's the new Soviet Union, Laura. I mean, you have to just relax. And in the end, we find out that China has a long-term plan, and their plan is domination. You reveal this in your book through painstaking analysis. Give us the blow by blow on how you discovered what you discovered about China's ambitions.
Well, don't forget, I was a participant in all this for a long time. That's why I say I was proud to be called the panda hugger, and I drank the Kool-Aid, what you're kind of opposing.
Yeah.
I used to be on the other side.
With Nixon and on down.
The whole thing begins back in 1969. That's when we first go wrong. And we never have gotten it right since then. I only woke up to this a few years ago, so I can't claim to be as prescient as you, Laura.
Well, tell us about how you came to have a conversion on this.
Well, the original plan, Ronald Reagan signed a classified document, which is on my 100-Year Marathon website. I put it up. It's his own signature at the bottom. And President Reagan got it right. I was working for him then over in the Pentagon. He put a condition. He said, we're going to sell weapons to China. We want China to be strong. He actually used the word strong in this presidential decision directive. But he had conditions on it. the conditions were that they not become aligned with Russia again, and that they move toward democracy and a free market.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is the decision directive didn't really have any punishment for officials who forgot those two conditions. And President Reagan and I and the rest of us all got caught up in the narrative that China was this internally oriented, angry, poor little country in its shell, and we Americans, starting with Nixon and Kissinger, had to bring China out of its shell. In order to do that, we had to have the biggest giveaway of scientific knowledge and trade concessions and unrestricted investment in history. And China, we now know that China started it. It was not an American initiative to open China. 4 Chinese generals wrote a memo, which they've now released. It's 40 years later, so it's safe for them to let this get out, that it was China's initiative. And Nixon and Kissinger 5 times turned down direct invitations. President Nixon, please come to China. This will be coming out of the Chinese. And Henry Kissinger explains in his new book, 2 or 3 years ago, he admits, yes, we turned down this initiative. We turned down this invitation for President Nixon. So if the whole thing has been a Chinese initiative from the beginning,
mm-hmm.
it's not the poor backward country that we need to nurture and bring out of its shell. It's the other way around, that they wanted stuff from us that they couldn't get from the Soviets, they couldn't do themselves, because of their long-term goal to become number one in the world, which also has recently been leaked. There's an old speech by the head of China in the 50s,
mm-hmm.
Mao Zedong.
Oh, of course.
Which has never been released. It just came out in one of the China Hawk's books, that Mao gave this order, secret order, that they still revere and want to abide by. In 1955, he told a few people, China's greatest contribution to human history will be to catch up and then surpass America. And this will take us from 50 to 75 years, but we must do it. And so the issue became, what's the best way to do it? Follow the Soviet model and have internal socialism and so forth, which they tried, but they only got 7% annual growth with that. They tried another approach, the communes, turning in on themselves, really terrible economic ideas, and they fell back. They had zero growth for 5 or 10 years,
mm-hmm.
and even a negative number. Then they got on the third model, which is how they saw Nixon, Kissinger, and Jimmy Carter. Let's get American technology, American science, American capital. We'll try the American 100-year marathon approach. And that one worked. But part of the strategy, they could not tell the Americans what they were up to. Then we wouldn't believe we're helping a poor backward country.
So Mike, let me just understand this. So when Obama and others, Republicans, when they say China's peaceful rise is something we welcome, that is either that is wildly naive, wholly ignorant, or disingenuous. There's only 3 options for that. When I hear people say things like that, I think you are either the most ignorant person to ever have spoken about China, or there's something else going on here, right? Because we know what China has been up to just in recent years with thwarting our interests and our desires in places like Iran, its collusion with North Korea, propping up that regime, what they've done to steal our technology beyond just the usual competitive stuff that countries do with each other. And, of course, the ever-growing crackdown against religious freedom, independent thought, and so forth, which has grown more brutal, not less, since the WTO deal that everyone was screaming about was so great. No more free than pre-WTO, and in many instances worse. So when the smart people over at the Wall Street Journal, they're the smart people, when they call people like me restrictionists and I'm a China basher, I think I'm more realistic. And in reading your book, you have a realistic assessment as to what China has always wanted since Mao and what China is on the pathway to accomplishing globally. Now, if I just said something that was untrue or you think I'm getting it wrong, please correct me, because I think you know more about this now than I do, obviously.
One thing you're getting wrong is the reason I had to write the book. I realized your view is the minority view. You could be correct, but unless you have evidence in a book to back up what you're saying, most people still continue to drink the Kool-Aid. And the evidence I had to get for the book, I knew was classified. Most of it was top secret. So I had two choices. Do a sort of a Snowden or a private Chelsea Manning, go in exile, go to jail, and say, here's all this stuff, you've got to read it. Or put it through the security review system of FBI, CIA, and the Pentagon. And they finally let most of it out, which really surprised me. In other words, somebody at FBI, CIA, and the Pentagon wants to support your views with evidence from 6 defectors from China who've told us this is what's going on. I had to disguise their names and their background.
Right, no, I saw that.
Then the declassified documents, just how naive we've been at the presidential level. Mm-hmm. I had to put them in. And the third thing is the writings of the Chinese hawks just in the last 5 years. In other words, it's not just a long-term Chinese plan from the 50s. They've escalated in the last 5 years because they believe, probably correctly, that they're ahead of schedule. They've been saying we're 15 years ahead of schedule now.
America's weaker than she was 10 years ago. America's less influential in the world. And so many other things have happened to our supremacy. And this is the perfect time for them to ramp things up, put it into real high gear. When we come back, we'll continue. This is a book you have to read. I know I say that a lot, but this is a must-read book. Michael Pillsbury gets it done. He's been converted. Different view before on China, and now the 100-Year Marathon, China's secret strategy to replace us as the global superpower. Meticulously researched. It's our featured selection on lauraingraham.com. You must get this book. Preach the gospel, the truth about what's going on with China. Staying with us. Don't go.
The Laura Ingraham Show.
Trade agreements. The President and I were just talking about that right before I came over here. Trade, we think it's good for America. And so I've got a lot of members who believe that international trade agreements are a winner for America.
We continue with Mike Pillsbury, whose new book on China is a smash. It's called The 100-Year Marathon, China's Secret Strategy to Replace America as the Global Superpower. And, Michael, you hear Mitch McConnell there, and he echoes the sentiment of the more establishment Republican types who receive a lot of money, let's face it, from campaign contributors who run global corporations that are desperate to keep the China market open to them. They think any trade reconsideration where we make things a little bit more balanced on our side is going to be bad for their business. And so it's just this mindless pro-free trade mantra that we hear without any real reflection as to how these deals have gone down for America. We never look at, okay, we said WTO was going to mean this, and in fact, this, that, and the other thing has happened. We never go back and re-examine our deals.
Well, some of the companies are beginning to complain to the government, though. The term gangsterized is being used. Our companies are being gangsterized in China. This means that the level of profit isn't what it used to be 15, 20 years ago. The ripping off of technology, the tough requirements, this is all coming to a head in something that's being negotiated now called the Bilateral Investment Treaty between the U.S. and China. And on the surface, it sounds like a great idea, but the details, if we stick to our position, we're basically saying, China, you have to sign this agreement. You will treat American companies in China the same way exactly as you treat your government-owned companies in China. And the Chamber of Commerce is for this. Everybody's sort of for it in principle, but the Chinese have a history of outsmarting and outfoxing us in these agreements toward the end because they know just what you're referring to, Laura. They know this vague sort of high school level love of trade still animates the American Congress. So unless the Congress looks deeply into the trade agreement and sees the terms and then says, no, we're not going to pass this, I'm afraid we're going to get another very vague agreement that China can then continue to gangsterize our companies.
Well, they cheat, they intimidate, they have, they forced high-tech companies to put in self-censoring mechanisms, right? We see that with Facebook. We've seen that with Google. We've seen that in entertainment companies in the United States that have actually edited films because China doesn't want certain information in film. So it's already happening. So eyes wide open on trade and re-examine the deals that have already been done over the last 25 years to actually objectively measure whether they have helped American workers and America, period, or we've gotten weaker since these trade deals. Mike Pillsbury, just a phenomenal book. We have to have you back. This is not enough time. Will you come back soon?
Hey, you bet.
All right. Thank you so much. Featured selection on our website, lauraingraham.com, the 100-Year Marathon. Fascinating. This will also be up on our YouTube channel, featured there as well.